Hello, Tacta. Happy to join you. Welcome to this speech. I don't know if it's morning, afternoon, or evening when you'll be watching this, but I'm very, very pleased to join you. First of all, I hope you're all safe and sound, that you're living through these difficult times with, let's say, good spirit. And please, let's say, continue to do that if you're doing so. I'm very happy to be virtually here. I've been in touch with Christina Leonard, one of the organizers, for some time. We've been knowing each other since 2017 in Amsterdam, and I'm very happy to be discussing these topics with you. I will not be using slides, so, you know, I mean, this will be a little bit a speech out of my heart and previous experiences and my thoughts, and I hope, hopefully, will be able to entertain you and make some interesting points for you. Before we get into the topic, a couple of words about myself. I'm 39 years old. I'm from Tuscany in the center of Italy. My studies were in economics. My bachelor degree was in economics and a master degree in international public policy. And I studied between Milan, London, Norway, and Tunisia. And then my professional career, which started 15 years ago. The first 3 years, I was a strategy consultant. I was working for a company called back then Monitor Group, today called Monitor Deloitte. And I was lucky enough to work in Italy, in South Africa, and in other European countries and locations. And then I joined the corporate world and I joined a company, the one that I'm part of, which is Barrila. So I joined Barrila 12 years ago. And I spent all of these 12 years in marketing and innovation, some, let's say, standard kind of marketing, and then some disruptive innovation. I was part of the team that came up with the idea, developed, launched, and managed a completely different business, which was called Cucina Barilla, which is the reason why I got in touch with Christina 3 years ago. And that was also the excuse, let's say, to get in touch with innovators and people from outside the company doing a similar job to mine. And now, as of the last 2 years, I'm a global marketing director. So I'm the global marketing reference for a category called pesto, which is a small but significantly strong and increasing category that Barilla is managing on a global basis. And I've been doing that, as I said, for the last 2 years. So all of my experiences is in marketing and innovation. Now, when it comes to innovation, I'll go back to this point in a couple of minutes, but just want to make sure that you, let's say, don't misunderstand me. I'm not the futurologist or the visionary expert kind of guy. I'm not the one telling you where the world is going to go 20 years from now. I don't have that, let's say, in my skill set. I'm the innovator more in the sense of the pragmatism, common sense, numbers driven, consumer insight driven, that needs always to be a business case, a solid business case out of something. Otherwise, we are getting it wrong. So I'm more that kind of guy. Maybe less exciting to be listening to or to be watching, but let's say that's who I am. And a couple of words about the company that I work for, Barilla. It's a family-owned company. It was founded by the Barilla family in 1877. So we are now at the fourth generation of the Barilla family managing it. And it's a company founded in Italy, in this city where I live right now, which is Parma, 1 hour south of Milan. And that gradually became a national company in Italy, then a European company, and then an international global company. So we have business in over 100 countries and we sell our products basically everywhere. I think that in Brazil, we sell definitely pasta and some sauces, as well as some bakery. So there are three sides to our business, let's say, three main categories. The first one is pasta. We are the biggest player globally on pasta. Then there are the ready-to-use sauces or the pasta sauces, which are significantly smaller than pasta, but growing significantly and being a very nice, let's say, match and pairing with the pasta business, which is our starting point. And these businesses, the pasta one and the sauces one, are global. Let's say source is more European, but getting also in Asia and in the American continent. The bakery business, which is our third leg, it's a super local one. So we have a strong bakery business in Italy. We have a good business in France, a good business in the Nordics, but it's always with a local brand, and it's always with different products from one country to the other, because the taste of consumers when it comes to bakery categories changes very, very fast from one place to the other. What do I mean by bakery? I mean biscuits, soft snacks, mini cakes, dry snacks, breadsticks, industrial bread, crackers, all of these, let's say, categories. So enough with the introductions. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. Let's get into the topic. Now, first of all, you might wonder, why am I so passionate about innovation? Where does that passion come from? Well, let's say I don't have an exciting answer to that possible question of yours. Let me say that for the way I am, for the kind of manager and mindset that I am, I don't get excited in the morning if I have to, go to the office or work from home and manage more or less what was already existing, and continue to manage what was already there before I got there. I really like either to try and make what was already existing a bit better, or to try and invent, create what wasn't there in the first place. So with these two broad definitions, just to clarify a little bit the way forward, we can, let's say, give a little bit of a classification to innovation. The first kind, the trying to make a little bit better what was already existing, is what is called a number of definitions, but let's say right here is what is called incremental innovation. What do I mean by incremental innovation? If I have a range of product, the new flavor, the new variant, the new pack size, the product upgrade. I mean, these kinds of things that as innovators maybe don't excite you too much. When I removed X% of salt, or I increased X% of that ingredient into the product, or I came out with an additional claim with a product I didn't have yesterday. So they don't excite us, let's say, but they're super important in the competitive scenario, because if you don't get to the claim, to the product grade soon enough, one of your competitors could come there before you and join there before you, and then you could be in a little bit of trouble. So this is the incremental innovation. It's a significant chunk of what I do right now. I have a business like the one of Pasty, which has a significant turnover already, and had it before I joined this role. I try to make it, every day a bit better, trying to steer every day the path into the right direction. Of course, that goes from the product side to the communication side to the branding side. I mean, to the whole thing. The other kind, when you try as an innovator to create what wasn't there in the first place, is what we call disruptive innovation or platform innovation. You really try to come up with something that wasn't there when you started. And this is what, for instance, what I tried to do on Cucina Barilla, where we tried to come up with a completely different business model, a completely different thing that nobody had ever tried in the world before us, picking on some consumer insights and some trends and some things which we saw were happening, but then trying to be really at the forefront. Now, incremental innovation and disruptive innovation are two completely different sides of innovation, especially when it comes to food companies, and especially when it comes to family-owned food companies. And to be honest with you, I've been basically, sitting at Barilla for 12 years, and it has been a little bit of a cycle on how much to focus on incremental innovation, how much to focus on disruptive innovation. And the truth of the matter is that both sides are important. Let's say the fans of incremental innovation and focusing mostly on that, if not only on incremental innovation, will tell you got to protect your current business. Unless you are a startup which is trying to come up and with something totally new and create something that's totally new, you have to protect your business from competition, consumer dissatisfaction, et cetera, et cetera. One of the key ways to do that is incremental innovation, of course. The ones in favor of disruptive innovation could be telling you the future is going to happen, and if you don't look a bit further and trying to anticipate it, you're going to be caught by surprise by some trends, competitors, things, etc. Now, you have topics in favor of each of those. The truth of the matter is, and what I realized after my 15 years of experience, is that any company, unless again you are a special kind of company in a special place of your life stage, any company needs to do both. You need to do both incremental innovation and disruptive innovation. You cannot afford to do incremental innovation only. You'll be losing trends and things that are popping up. But if you do disruptive innovation only, you really risk of losing your current business, because disruptive innovation is super exciting, super interesting, but the truth of the matter is super expensive, in the sense that trying to anticipate what the world is going to do is a risky kind of business. And the chances that you get it right, and you get it right the first time around, are minimal, if not zero. So why you try to invent the new world? You always need to protect the current one. So I think that companies in general should look at incremental and disruptive innovation with this approach. Now, how many of your people should do incremental versus disruptive? What percentage of your organization, or what percentage of your development money should be allocated to incremental versus disruptive? That's really down to the company, the context, the category, the strategy, the vision that the company has. And I cannot give you a perfect recipe for all the solutions. What I can tell you about disruptive innovation, though, and it's something that I discussed also sometimes in the past, is the people that work on disruptive innovation should really be separated from the rest of the business. Ideally, even from a physical standpoint. I'm assuming that we'll go back to the office and we will resume our office life. They should be in a different building compared to the ones focusing on the core business, on the core category and incremental innovation. They should work, for instance, without a brand. Truth of the matter is, the more you keep them close to the ones doing incremental innovation and managing the current business, sales, etc., the higher is the risk that you end up having not disruptive innovation anymore, but other sides, other shades of incremental innovation. The ideal brief for a disruptive innovation or platform innovation kind of team is, these are the money that you can spend. Take your time, come back when you have a good idea. That's it. And try to not put any limits into, you need to have an idea with that brand in mind, or with that business model in mind, or with that category in mind. Otherwise, you risk of going back to where you started, basically. So first of all, innovation. Why am I so passionate? As I said, I find super boring to focus on what's already existing, and I try to have an impact and to always add value to what I do. Second aspect is food companies. Now, first of all, why am I so passionate about food? You could go back to the stereotypes. I'm Italian, so food is in my blood, which are, generally speaking, quite true. Then in my specific case, they are even more true, because my parents were running and run their whole life a food shop, a butcher shop and deli shop. So I grew up basically surrounded by food and surrounded by this entrepreneurial way of looking at food and trying to anticipate trends or catching them as early as possible. But when it comes to food companies, and I guess, I mean, food companies like Barilla, so the ones that selling the final products to the consumers through retailers, but through the consumers, are just one side of it. Then you have the companies working on appliances, which help you transform the ingredients, the product, etc. Or you have the ones working on flavors or ingredients for companies like Barilla. Food companies and innovation are special, because if you think of it as a consumer yourself, food has this very special characteristic that very few other categories have, of being, in terms of the way we buy it, cook it, or consume it, is one of these categories that has this characteristic of being, at the same time, super traditional, old, based on routines, and super changing at the speed of light. And I think that COVID gave us a perfect example of that. I mean, the way that we had on a global basis to live through COVID. Now, I'm not sure if this applies specifically to Brazil, but I guess some of it anyhow, and definitely applies to the rest of the world, is that you saw people doing these two completely different things when it came to food. On one hand, going back to 20, 30, 40 years ago, buying flour and yeast, trying to make pizza, bread, biscuits, buying pasta. So buying the super basic categories of food that you can buy in mass market. Of course, we were all trying to entertain ourselves and keep ourselves a little bit busy, but you know, we all switched to food to do that, to keep ourselves entertained and busy. On the other hand, COVID gave an incredible acceleration to food deliveries, new ways of, new startups, new way of cooking it, new ideas. You saw popping up and coming stuff which had not popped up and not come for the previous 5-10 years. It popped up in 5-6 weeks. And the acceleration to some of the trends that were already there was incredible. So all of a sudden you find yourself as a consumer in this special time of COVID, but not only, COVID was just an acceleration of that. You find yourself both doing this, I'll go back to the routine. Actually, I'll go back to the routine of my parents or grandparents to a certain extent. Traditions are super important and they're super tough to change. But on the other hand, I'm gonna try and experiment. I'm gonna try new things, see and instill new routines to my children, and et cetera, et cetera. So I found that incredibly interesting. This goes back exactly to what we were saying 1 minute ago about short-term incremental innovation, long-term disruptive innovation. In food, you always have to do both, because the truth of the matter is the reality is that people are gonna be trying both. They're not gonna give up on one or the other. If I sum up this, and I, let's say, make these two trends, these two aspects a bit extreme, what I can foresee, and again, I'm not a futurologist, I'm more of a pragmatist, but what I can foresee in food in the next few years is a further fragmentation of consumers into consumers and consumption occasions and consumptions, generally speaking, into niches. So depending on where you live and depending on the life stage of some categories, we were all used to, this is the way that general population consumes that category, that food category in this specific time. I think that going forward, that is going to become less and less the case. And I think it's going to be more and more the case of there is a fraction of general population doing this, a fraction of general population doing that. And differently to what we were thinking a few years ago, that fraction doing this or that will never explode. It's unlikely that's going to explode. Maybe it'll get bigger because the same thing will happen in more countries. So you'll get, let's say, scale around that consumption occasion, that category, that thing, but it will never get to general population. So I've been looking at that for the last 5 to 10 years, and I can see that COVID gave a further acceleration to that. So more and more niches. So prepare yourself as a company, as a manager, to face that, because once your consumers are splitting themselves and the consumption occasions are splitting themselves into multiple small things, some of the things that you have could be perfect and great and a point of strength. Some of the things that you have could be a point of weakness. Imagine if you are a company that has standardized production lines and is able to do one thing and one thing only, and then all of a sudden that only thing doesn't exist anymore because it got split into 3, 4, 5 different things, which are all a variation of the standard one. So all of that to say, long-term, short-term, incremental, disruptive, fragmentation of consumption occasions and consumers. There is a very nice term which I happen to like and I happen to recommend in case you haven't bumped into it yet, which is ambidexterity. So both right and left. And there is a little bit of a culture which goes back to the early 2000s about the ambidexter organizations, the ones that are able to do both the short term and the long term, continue to fine tune and improve what's already existing, but try to come up with what is not existing yet. Now, I make it more of a personal point, to be honest with you. I think that we need to be managers with that ambidexterity. And if you want to read about that, there are some nice papers by Harvard Business Review, and multiple sources have been speaking about the topic. I'm sure there are plenty of publications about that. But I try personally to be that kind of manager, to always be thinking about the big picture, the long term, what could be happening 1 to 5 years from now, and not lose track of the short term, the details which always make a difference. Last part of my little chat with you is about family-owned companies. Now, I've been working only as a corporate. I've been working only in a family-owned company, which is Barrila. But I know a little bit about non-family-owned companies, publicly listed, et cetera, et cetera. What I find amazing about family-owned companies and innovation, and what I found it incredibly powerful and exciting, is that family-owned companies, of course, are different one from the other. Depends on what kind of entrepreneur, first generation or sixth generation, in what part of the world, what life stage, what mindset. I mean, these are all, I mean, each of them is different, of course, because it goes down to the entrepreneur and to the owner. But what I find they had in common, and it's something that's super, super interesting for people that want to focus and develop in innovation, is that no matter what they're doing, no matter what kind of strategy is in place, no matter what kind of focus on the short term is, and sometimes focus on short term is great, the family-owned companies and the family entrepreneurs will always have a fraction of their mind, a fraction of their energy, thinking super long term, thinking the next 30 years. Because they always want to give the company that they are managing to the next generation. And they want to give it to the next generation, so 30, 40, 50 years from now, in a better shape than what the company was when they were managing it themselves. Now, I'm not saying they are all thinking 100% about that all the time, but I would say a fraction of their time, a fraction of their mind, a fraction of their spirit is always focused on that. And I find it incredibly powerful, because as innovators, as people that want to contribute to that, to build a better future, a more meaningful future, having that kind of environment, that kind of cultural environment around you is perfect. It doesn't mean that you can forget about the short term, of course, but it means that, you know, sometimes you get challenged, that you were not thinking in the future late enough, further away enough. If you were thinking the next 3-5 years, that they could come up with a comment or a question about, okay, but what about the next 20? So I found that incredibly powerful and incredibly inspiring. So just wrapping up everything that I discussed. I think that as innovators in food companies and family-owned companies, there is this element of ambidexterity, this capability of doing the short term and the long term, which is super important. And there is also another element which is very close and very related to that, which is we need to find a way as innovators to add value to the business, the conversations, the categories, the products, the brands that we are working on and attending. And one of the ways to add value, at least one of the latest ideas that I've been having about that is really try to find access to all the resources, internal and external, from the company that you can get access to in order to make an impact, add value, leverage on the ambidexterity of yourself or the organization. I mean, my feeling is that resources are everywhere, both internal and external. And of course, internal, I mean, not the ones that are supposed to help you by job description, the ones that are not supposed to help you, but if you reach them in a constructive way enough, they're anyhow going to help you. So I'm looking at the broad sense of resources, and I'm not thinking money, to be honest with you. I'm more thinking people and know-how, and how to get from here to there, leveraging on what we in the broader meaning of the word already know. Okay, so I think that one of the key challenges for the future, and COVID just made us realize that even more than we were already doing, will be how to be an ambidexter kind of manager, how to add value, how to bring an impact in your work, how to access all the resources that are around you. The ones that will be able to do that will be coming up with more meaningful innovations and will be making a bigger impact. So that's it from my side. I hope this was, let's say, entertaining enough or not too boring. And hopefully we'll be managed to catch up in the Q&A. Otherwise, please continue to stay safe and sound and enjoy the rest of the event.